guys, it's Hayden here. Listen, you've been asking for a comprehension video. I'm here. I'm delivering the comprehension video. So stick around for some SATs comprehension. Now, if you're someone who, when faced with a 3-mark question in the mock SATs papers, whatever you've been doing at school, is someone who just skips them. You just go, yeah, I'll just leave that blank because that's way too much work. Way too much work. I don't want to answer 3-mark questions, and you just skip them, right? Or perhaps you're someone who has a go at the 3-mark questions and you consistently get 1 or 2 marks and you're like, why do I never get 3 marks? Then this is the video for you. So stick around. I'm going to go through a few questions from past papers, and by the end, hopefully you'll feel really confident to tackle 3-mark questions, knowing exactly what you should be doing. We're even going to look at some mark schemes from the SAT so you can see how they're marked to hopefully help you answer these in the future in the right way and get 3 marks, because 3 marks is awesome. Why would you leave a 3-mark question? That's amazing. So I'm going to hopefully blow your mind with a few things today and show you that you could get 2 marks in these 3-mark questions in about 20 seconds. If you just think that's mad, isn't it? Really, you could easily get 2 marks. I'll show you what I mean in a bit. But here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with something from the 2023 paper. So a fairly recent SATs at the time of recording this. And this was a 3-mark question in this text here called Bats Under the Bridge. Now, as you may well already know, in the SATs, there's always been 3 texts for you to answer questions on. And you normally only get 3-mark questions in the 2nd or the 3rd text. They tend to keep slightly easier questions for the 1st text. So you're a bit further in the paper by this point, and you've come up against this question here. Okay, so we don't need to read the whole text, but I will read you the question, and then we can maybe think about where we would go in the text to do that, to answer it. So the question is this: what positive messages does Harriet, who is the narrator by the way, want readers to understand about bats? Give 2 positive messages using evidence from the text to support your answer. So what that basically means is, think of something positive that you get out of this, that the narrator Harriet's telling you, and then just back that up by saying what the text actually says, to basically prove that you've read that, prove that you've not just guessed what might be positive. You might just think, what do I like about bats? And write something down and get a lucky guess. You've got to prove that you've actually read the text with some evidence. And this is one of the nicest questions I've ever seen for 3 marks. It even gives you an example of exactly how you should be laying this out. Look at this. It says, positive message: bats shouldn't be judged by their appearance. So that's clearly a message that comes out of this text when you read it. And here's the evidence. She says, even though they might look scary, they aren't really. So clearly that's what she actually says in the text. There's my evidence that backs up this positive message. Awesome. So here's the cool thing. When you get something like this, it's like a non-fiction. This is actually an interview. It's like question and answer going through, talking to this person called Harriet about bats. Well, each question really shows, it's like a subheading. It really shows you what content is going to be in the answer, the paragraph below it. And when you go through these subheadings, this one jumps out at me. It says, what benefits could bats possibly bring to humans? When I saw that question, I thought to myself straight away, clearly in this paragraph, this is where I'm going to find my positive messages about bats, or at least the majority of my positive messages about bats, right? So you guys in that test, don't sit there and read the whole text again looking for some positive messages. Be smart. If there's subheadings, then see if the subheadings can help you identify which paragraphs might have your answer in them. So let's actually read this out loud. You can read it in your head, you can pause it, do what you want, but I'm going to read this out for you in case you just want to listen along. And then we'll think about some positive messages that come out of this, and we can think about what the evidence was for that as well. So here we go. The question was to Harriet, what benefits could bats possibly bring to humans? And she said this: we humans spend a great deal of time battling against insects. Who hasn't been tormented by mosquitoes or wasps? And farmers have to spend millions of dollars every year buying chemicals, some of which are quite harmful to the environment, to stop hungry insects from eating their crops. A group of bats, like the ones under this bridge, will eat about 10 tons of insects every night. That's about the weight of 2 normal-sized elephants. So we should view bats as allies, not as enemies. Some farmers are already doing this by installing bat boxes in their fields and encouraging bats to live there. So I think there's a really clear positive message there. Why didn't you have a think about what the positive message is that's coming out of this about bats? Well, it's clearly linked to farmers, isn't it? I think it's very clear that she's saying bats are beneficial. That means it's good for, it means they benefit. Bats are beneficial for farmers, or farming in general, I guess. Bats are beneficial for farming. And what's the evidence for that? How can we prove from the text that bats are beneficial for farming? Well, let's just think, what made me form that opinion in the first place? Well, it was this bit right here. It says that farmers have to spend millions of dollars buying chemicals to get rid of the insects, but bats eat insects for their dinner. Do you know what I mean? They already eat them. They don't cost any money. So my evidence for bats being beneficial for farming is they eat the insects. And what do the insects do? Why is that relevant? They eat the insects that, I'm going to use directly from the text here, that are quite harmful. That are harmful to crops or crop growth. So there's my evidence from the text. Okay, she made it very clear that that's the problem, that hungry insects eat their crops, which would have been an easier bit of evidence to write. Hungry insects eat their crops. Okay, so we've got one positive message. Are there any other positive messages? And by positive message, just remember that just means something nice about bats. Is there anything nice we could say about bats that could be backed up from something in here? What about this bit here? This simple sentence. So we should view bats as allies, not enemies. Couldn't I say then, bats are friendly? Bats are our friends, right? Allies means friends, right? Bats are our friends. That's a nice positive message, isn't it? Bats are our friends. Woohoo! Excuse my handwriting, guys, because I'm rushing through on a screen. Very hard to do. Bats are our friends. Okay, and my evidence for that is, do you know what? Sometimes you can just copy directly from the text. My evidence is this. She said, we should view bats as allies. That's my evidence, because allies means friends. Okay? Woohoo! I got 3 marks. Wowzers. And you know what, guys? I actually had 3 marks before I even wrote this bit. You might be thinking, what? How can you have 3 marks before you finish the question? Well, the mark schemes for 3-mark questions are actually really quite forgiving. I'll show you. This is the mark scheme here that I've pulled straight from. This is the real one. This is from the actual SATs. I've not made this up. This is what the markers of the SATs would have used. And this is the list they get. They say, right, any of these points are acceptable. And then the green ones are the ones that we just went for. Bats are beneficial for farming, and bats are our friends. And then we had any of these bullet points are examples of evidence from the things that she says. But look at the top bit. How crazy is this? Award 3 marks. So all 3 marks for 2 acceptable points. So I could have just said they're beneficial for farming and they're friendly. And at least 1 with evidence. So only 1 of them even needs the evidence. So if I was running out of time and I'd made these points in my head, I thought, okay, they're good for farming and they're friendly. If I write those 2 things down, I've got 2 marks already. How mad is that? Look, award 2 marks for 2 acceptable points, or just 1 point with evidence. So at no point do you actually need both bits of evidence for all 3 marks. It's worth doing, and I'll tell you why it's worth doing. I've seen children before, if I go back 1 step, I've seen them do a really good bit of evidence for 1, but something that's not evidence for the second one, and they still get their 3 marks, because actually they had 2 valid points, 1 with really good evidence, and then this one, let's say this was the bad evidence. Well, they didn't need it anyway, so it didn't lose them any marks. That's kind of cool. So there we go. There's my first question. Lovely, lovely question. There's another one from the 2023 paper that I really liked. And this was from the 3rd text, which was a story about a wolf. It's quite an interesting little story, but it's a narrative. So we've not got subheadings this time to help us find information. But the question does something nice. Look at this. It says, look at the paragraph beginning. When I see those words, I think, oh yeah, that's just made my life easy, because it's telling me where to look in the text rather than saying, look at the whole text. You know, because that's annoying, isn't it? You've got to read the whole thing then. Look at the paragraph beginning, Innis sat up, which you'll see I've copied here for you, to the end of the text. So there it is. That's from that paragraph all the way to the end of the text. Not too much to read, really, is it? Probably a minute's worth of reading. And then the question says, Innis meets the boy. So Innis is clearly our character, our main character. What do you learn about the boy's personality? So we've got this much text to meet this boy and learn about his personality. And think about that. What does that actually mean? Like, what is someone's personality? How do you know what someone's personality is? Is it by the way they look? Not really. You know, you might be able to tell something, you know, if someone's fashion sense might give you a hint into the kind of things they like, but it doesn't really tell you about someone's personality, like their thoughts and feelings, the way they act, you know, if they're polite, if they're rude. You can't really tell unless you're speaking to them. okay, which he does in this. We can see right here, he starts speaking to the boy. So that's really going to help us. Now, the reason I've said this is because there's a really good trap here at the start. Innes, if I just skip through this part here, Innes sees the boy walking towards him. Then here, he starts describing the boy. So I'll read this to you. He was smaller than Innes, but seemed older. So a lot of children go for personality. Oh, he's older. Is that a personality thing, really? Your age? I don't think so. That's not part of your personality. In appearance, the boys were the exact opposite. The stranger was squat with short, fair hair, shaved almost to the scalp. He had dark, unfriendly eyes. Innes didn't know him. Again, children will lock onto this bit and go, oh, he's unfriendly. And you've got to be careful, because if you describe someone's appearance as having unfriendly eyes, really you're just making a judgment about what their eyes look like. He's not actually done anything to be unfriendly, has he? So that brings me to my second point. To learn someone's personality, it's through what they do and what they say, their actions and their words. That's how you really learn about someone's personality. So this paragraph is a bit of a trap. It's not actually going to help us. I'm going to read the rest to you now, and then I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and I want you to see if you can pick out 2 things that you could say about the boy's personality, a bit about this boy, backed up by evidence from what you've just heard and what you've just read. So let's read it first. The boy turned and took a step away, and Innes asked, "Where are you going?" "What's it to you?" the boy asked, without turning or stopping. "There's a wolf out there," Innes said. The boy stopped and headed back towards Innes. "Where exactly?" Innes pointed. "Out there somewhere." "You saw it?" probed the boy. "I heard it and I saw it." The boy didn't answer, but asked instead, "How far?" "Not far, 5 minutes from here." The boy sighed and wiped snow from his face. He turned and strode off without another word. Okay, pause the video. I want you to write down 2 things that you've learned about this boy's personality and try to back it up with why you think that from the text. All right, so first things first then. The first thing I notice is right at the start here where he says, "What's it to you?" I don't know about you guys, but when I was reading that, I thought, well, that's a bit rude. Like, didn't you? I thought, that's a bit mean, that's a bit rude. So you could say, straight away, personality, bit rude. It was a bit abrupt, perhaps. And my evidence would be, he abruptly said, and that's a really important part of my evidence, that I'm showing that I know the way he said it and why that's rude. He abruptly said, "What's it to you?" And I'm even going to add in, to make it really clear, without turning or stopping. Okay? Without, you get the idea. I'm not going to write it all out for you guys, but you get the idea. Without turning or stopping. So I think that's one really, really good point with evidence. There's 2 marks straight away. Look at that. 2 out of the 3 marks, because we've got 1 point and 1 evidence. So really, to get the 3rd mark now, all we actually need is just another valid point about his personality. So what else can we discover? Let's keep reading. "There's a wolf out there," Innes said. The boy stopped. "Where exactly?" I noticed he also said, "You saw it?" Question mark. "How far?" He asks a lot of questions, doesn't he, this boy? And what could we say about someone's personality if they ask a lot of questions? Well, you might be saying right now, "Oh, they're curious." That would be another really valid point. Curious. And do you know what? At this point, I've got 3 marks. They're not that bad, are they, these questions? They're not as bad as maybe you thought before. But let's keep going, just for the sake of it. Let's see what, how else could we have got marks? So curious, and my evidence would have been, he asks multiple questions. Okay? He asks lots of questions. Done. What else could we have done? Because there's usually more than 2 options to get the marks. There's usually lots of things you can choose from. Let's think outside the box a little bit more. Okay, this boy is also on his own. Now, if you'd read the rest of the text, you'd know that would be quite strange, because he's out, he's out in the Arctic or something like that, and he's in the snow where there's no one's around other than this wolf that he can hear. And this mysterious boy is on his own. Okay, so what does that suggest about someone's personality if they're on their own in a place where most people wouldn't be on their own? I suppose it suggests they're quite independent, wouldn't you agree? So you could say he's independent, and that would be your evidence. He's on his own in a dangerous place. What else could we say? We could also say he doesn't talk very much. because he's quite abrupt, isn't he? He doesn't really say much. He doesn't sort of have a conversation with Innes. He kind of just says what he wants, and then he walks. Look at this bit here. He sighs and just walks away. He doesn't even sort of say anything to Innes's last statement. Again, that might back up the fact that he's rude, but also him not talking very much makes him kind of mysterious. Would you agree? You could say his personality is a bit mysterious, maybe a bit secretive, because he doesn't actually answer any of Innes's questions. He said this: the boy didn't answer, but asked instead. So this bit here could be a bit of evidence for saying he's quite secretive. Yeah, there's lots of things here is what I'm trying to say, and all you need is 2 of them, and only one of them needs evidence anyway. So let's have a quick look at the mark scheme. What could we have got? So he's unfriendly and rude. That's what we got, and there was lots of different bits of evidence there. They actually gave the mark for unfriendly eyes, and I think that's dangerous. I think the unfriendly eyes is just a description of what he looks like. But there we go. The mark scheme is more forgiving than you think it is. Always go for the best possible answer, but it's more forgiving than you think. He's independent. We talked about that. He's curious. We talked about that. He's mysterious. He's secretive. We talked about all these things because they were all evident, and you only needed 2 of them. Sorry, here. 2 acceptable points, 1 evidence, or just 2 acceptable points if you need 2 marks. Let's imagine you're in the test, right? and you're thinking, oh no, there's only 1 minute left and I've got 3 marks. Do you know what? If you'd read this text and you'd already picked up that he's a bit rude, and you just wrote rude here, there's 1 mark. And then you notice that he asks a bunch of questions and you say curious, and it's taking you 15 seconds to do that. You've just got 2 marks in 15 seconds. So these questions are great. Don't skip them. Stop skipping them, everybody. Anyways, I've got 1 more question to show you. And this was from the 2022 paper. And the reason I wanted to show you this one is because I think it's a bit harder. These kind of questions, this is when the 3-mark questions get a bit trickier, because you have to have an understanding of the whole text. I mean, look at the first line. It says, think about the whole text. How is a mysterious atmosphere created? And that just means, how does the text feel mysterious in general? What mysterious things happen to make this story feel mysterious? And the text is called A Traveller in Time. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read the whole text to you. And all I want you to do as you're watching this video is get a bit of paper or something you can write on. And I just want you to jot down, I want you to try to jot down at least 2 things in the text, at least, that make you think, oh, that's mysterious. That's it. That's your only job, okay? And we'll get to the end. And if you've got more than 2, then that means you've got ideas to pick from to craft a really good answer here. So here we go. I'm going to read this to you. I'm sorry if it's a bit small, but hopefully you can read along if you pull the screen a bit closer, or I don't know, make it full screen, whatever. So anyway, it says this. This text is about a young girl called Penelope who describes an unusual experience in her home. The story takes place in the early 20th century, before electric lights were common in most households. A traveller in time. Ours was a steep, crooked stair with a handrail on one side, very narrow, with rooms leading off it so suddenly that it was easy to fall headlong as one stepped from a doorway. We had wallpaper with leaves on it, like a green wood in spring, and I used to sit on the stairs, pretending I was in a forest with birds singing around me. I was sitting there one evening, with my feet tucked under me in a blue dusk, waiting for the lamplighter to come whistling down the street to bring a gleam to the stairway. So the picture there kind of shows you what a lamplighter is. I'm sure you can imagine, back when lamps weren't electric, exactly what the role of a lamplighter might have been. Where was I? There was a street lamp near, and this shone over the door and saved us from using our own gas lamp. So nothing mysterious yet, I would say. I don't think any of that is mysterious, just setting a scene of where this girl is. Let's keep reading. I was suddenly aware how quiet it was. I might have been the only person in the world. Even the clock stopped ticking, and the mice ceased rustling in the wainscot. I turned my head and saw a lady coming downstairs from the upper floor. She was dressed in a black dress which swept around her like a cloud, and at her neck was a narrow white frill which shone like ivory. Her eyes were very bright and blue as violets. I sprang to my feet and smiled up at her. Into the beautiful grave face she bent towards me. She gave an answering smile, and her deep-set eyes seemed to pierce me, and I caught my breath as I stood aside to let her pass. I never heard a footstep. She was there before I was aware. Okay, anything mysterious happening there? I'm going to start underlining things actually as we go. This is what I would encourage you to do in the test, guys. I'm going to give you a tip here. Use your pen, use whatever you've got in the test. Start underline. If you're looking for mysterious things, underline mysterious things that happen. Okay, this is straight away mysterious. I was suddenly aware how quiet it was. Even the clock stopped ticking. So this is starting to make a weird atmosphere, right? And then down here, I'd say the description of her isn't mysterious. It's just a description of a woman. She's just in a black dress. So try not to fall into a trap there. The mysterious bit is the fact that she didn't even hear a footstep. She was there before I was aware. Basically, she didn't make a sound. Like this lady in this big dress who you'd expect to make these footsteps and make quite a bit of noise perhaps, didn't seem to make any noise at all. That's a bit weird. Let's keep reading. She went by as I leaned against the wall, and I pressed myself against the paper to leave room for her full floating skirts, which took all the stairway. So she's in a big dress. I never felt them touch me, and this gave me a curious sensation. Okay, that's weird. That's mysterious. You know, she's taken up the whole hallway, but she didn't actually feel her dress touch her. Soundlessly, she swayed down the stairs. That soundlessness again. That kind of goes back to this one. She swayed down the stairway, and I stood watching her, smelling the sweet, faint odour of her dress, seeing the pallor of the hands which held her ruffled skirt, yet hearing nothing at all. I think there's a really strong bit of evidence building up here that it's mysterious, that there's this lady that's appeared from nowhere, and she makes no sounds. There's no noise to her movements. That's weird. Let's keep reading. I leaned over the rail to watch her, and suddenly she was gone. Okay. That's pretty mysterious. She just disappeared. The clock ticked loudly. The sounds of the street came to my ears. The lamplighter's whistle, clear and round, fluted through the air, and the bright gleam of the gas danced upon the patterned wall. So to me, what's happening there is, it was like time stopped when she said about the clock stopping ticking. This weird interaction happened with this kind of ghostly lady. Maybe she was a ghost. And then she disappeared, and then time seemed to carry on as if, yeah, really weird, really weird. Let's keep reading. Cool, though. I ran downstairs and pushed open the door into the sitting room, expecting to see her there. The room was empty. And I went thoughtfully down to the basement where my mother was cooking, and I asked about the lady. "Oh, there's no one, child," she exclaimed. "You've imagined her. It's easy to think you see someone in the dusk, with the flickering streetlights falling on the walls. It was the shadows of someone in the street, perhaps." I was positive I had seen the lady, and I described her. Mother was very quiet, as if she were thinking what to say next. Then she changed the conversation, asking me if I would like to make treacle toffee that night. So that's a bit mysterious, I think. Like, I think the author has made that sound really mysterious, like as if like Mum knows something about it, but she doesn't want to say anything. That's the kind of impression I'm getting there. So through reading that text, and yes, that took a few minutes, and probably you would have read the text already by this point through answering the other questions, and maybe you're just skimming through at this point looking for evidence that it was mysterious. I'd say there's quite a lot there, wouldn't you? I think that we've got enough here to build up a 3-mark question. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick a few of these things and put them into one, and put them into 2 things, to make a 3-mark question. So clearly the sound, it's got to be one, isn't it? So if I'm answering the question, which says give 2 ways how it's a mysterious atmosphere is created using evidence from the text to support your answer, I'm going to use my favorite word, which is because. And sometimes I even use the phrase because the text says. And this is a really good way to make it really clear that you're now using evidence to support your answer. So what was mysterious? Okay, the lack of sound. The lack of sound the lady made. And I now got to explain why that's mysterious. That's 1 mark so far. I've not really used evidence. Why is that mysterious then? What's my evidence to prove that that's mysterious? And my evidence will be because, and then I'm going to go straight back to the text, because, here we go. I can use any of these bits. I could say that, she brushed past her, but she heard nothing at all. Or the text says soundlessly. Or the text says, I never heard a footstep. She was there before I was aware. I think that's a really strong bit of evidence. So I'm going to say exactly that. I'm going to put in my answer because the text says, and then I put my quotation mark and I would insert exactly what I just showed you there. And that way I'm guaranteeing myself the 2 marks for that first statement. And now I know all I need to do for this second one is just say something that's correct, even if my evidence is not that good. So let's think of another piece of evidence now, just for the sake of it, to show that a mysterious atmosphere is created. So we've got the silence thing. I don't know. Maybe this one here. Perhaps I could say it's mysterious that the mother didn't want to say anything about it. So mother's reaction was a bit mysterious. And my evidence would be that mother was very quiet, as if she was thinking about what to say next. That would be my evidence. Okay? So anyway, I could write that down, but you get the idea. So you pick a piece of evidence, you think about what that means, and then you craft them both into a sentence using the lovely words because or because the text says. Here is the mark scheme, just so you can see the amount of things you could have actually put down here. So we could have said any of these points with a bit of evidence, and I'll just read the points out to you. We could have said the fact that the time or movement stops. I mean, that was pretty mysterious, right? That's a pretty obvious one. The absence of sound, okay? The lack of sound. The lady's unexpected experience, the fact that the fact that she just appears there and then disappears later on. Her mother's unusual reaction, that's what we were just talking about. The sudden return to normality, so we talked about that when we were reading the text, how it's a bit odd that it's like time stops in it and then suddenly everything just goes back to normal. That's quite mysterious. The lady being a stranger to Penelope, but just like in her house, a bit odd. Penelope being on her own when she sees the lady. I'm not really sure that's a strong one, but like we've said before, the mark scheme's forgiving. Don't leave these questions blank. The fact that she's wearing very unusual clothes and has an unusual effect on Penelope, like she makes her feel like a curious sensation, I think it said, when she brushes past her, would be the evidence for that. And the last one is the lady's strange or unearthly features, the kind of sense that we get that she's maybe a bit of a ghost or something like that. Really forgiving, even though it's a very hard question because it does require your understanding of the whole text. There's always lots and lots and lots of ways you can get those 3 marks. They're never mean enough to only give you 2 acceptable points with evidence, and you have to find those very specific things. There's always more to it. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave the video there. I'm hoping that by the time you've watched this whole thing, I'm hoping you're feeling a little bit more confident with 3-mark questions now. And just remember, it's all about playing the game with these ones as well. You only need 2 acceptable points, and one of them needs evidence. Do both with evidence, because that just means that if one of the evidences is not so good, you can still get 3 marks from the other one being solid. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. So, your turn. Bit different this time. I was a bit stumped on how I can give you a question that's a 3-mark question without having to write a whole text on the screen. It doesn't really work. So I'm just going to ask you for a favour this time, because you guys have been asking for a comprehension video, and I really wanted to do one for you. They're really hard to plan because comprehension is much harder to kind of show online. So all I'd like in return is if you'd subscribe to our videos if you haven't already, or give this one a thumbs up, or even leave a comment. Every time you leave a comment, YouTube goes, hey, that video is popular, and then it shows it to more people, and it helps us grow our channel even more, because we're approaching 10,000 subscribers, and if you're watching this in the future when we've already hit 10,000 subscribers, then do it anyway, please, because it's still nice. Maybe we can get 20k. I don't know. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. Have the best day, and do subscribe for more videos in the future. We've got plenty more coming.